Yippee yay. All right.
Computer.
Okay.
Maybe to jump on the Zoom.
Or you can monitor the chat from that computer. Okay. All right, everybody. Hello. Welcome to this brave new experiment that we have going on. We are trying a hybrid meeting in a classroom space that has a microphone dangling from the ceiling. So I hope that you can all hear me. I am without some of my co-presenters today. Some folks are doing this virtually. Some folks couldn't be here today due to either work conflicts or sickness. So please bear with us as we try to run a brand new thing with maybe different help than we're used to. But I'm grateful to have the tech support of Salt Lake Community College here tonight. In particular, Harrison. Thank you, Harrison.
Welcome.
And we also have some people here in person. Let's try this brave new experiment. Please use your hand raising feature as usual. That would be very helpful. Let's introduce the people who are on the Ballpark Community Council board who are able to unmute or speak in person. Doug, could you say hello?
Hello, I'm Doug Flagler. I'm on one of the board members of the Ballpark Community Council. I live over by Jefferson Park, and I've been there for about 7 years.
Thanks, Doug. Jeff.
Hi, this is Jeff Sandstrom. Good to see everybody again.
Who all else is on? Let's get some hand raised. Let's see, nobody else for the moment, unless they can't find their hand raising feature. Okay, well, I'm pleased that we've got a few board members on tonight. So we only have 3 things on the agenda tonight. We're going to hear from Council Member Darren Mono. We're going to hear from Detective Sam Fallows, and then we're going to hear from a group from the Planning Commission about what I think we're all most curious about, and that's the Ballpark next rezone, meaning the rezone of multiple properties around the area that will formerly contain the ballpark. Let's see. Councilmember Mono, would you be so kind as to raise your virtual hand so I can find you and make you a co-host and unmute you? Hello, Councilmember Mono.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you great.
Okay, good. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Thank you. I'll just give a few updates and I'm happy to take some questions. We just finished in terms of council, like annual council actions, we just finished adopting the CIP projects, which includes 3 specific to District 5. One is some funding for Jefferson Park. This is through the general CIP process. We also, I believe, we're going to be getting some funding through the GEO bond as well. Those projects haven't been 100% finalized to my knowledge, what's going to get the GEO bond funding, but Jefferson Park was on the top of my priority list, and and I believe the administrations as well, but this is guaranteed funding for Jefferson Park above anything that may also come in the GO bond. There was a Main Street Safer Crossings project, and then 200 East ADA sidewalk improvements. I believe all of those are in or very close to Ballpark. 200 East is just the block east of Ballpark boundaries. We also, this last Tuesday, picked up again the discussion on the fleet block zoning. So there's two pieces to what the city's doing there. One is a rezone so that we can change the zoning on that block so that it's more in line with what's coming, what we think might be coming. And then the second is to actually dispose of the property. So those are two sort of simultaneous things happening. But on Tuesday, we started talking again about the rezone. We heard about a right across the street from Ballpark zoning change on 1435 South State Street. And that would change some commercial corridor zoning and one single family residential parcel to form-based urban neighborhood 2. This is right on the same block as, if you'll remember, the Coachman's restaurant rezone that we did a year or so ago. Nothing has happened on the Coachman's site, as you're all well aware, which I'm disappointed by, but this is on that same block face just south of it, asking for basically the same thing that Coachman's asked for. Two things that are coming up are Thriving in Place, which is the city's anti-gentrification study and planning process. So strategies that we can do to help make sure that as the city changes and grows, that people are able to stay in the city that live here, that we're not kicking people out, people aren't displaced. And then the other piece that is coming soon that we'll begin discussing, which is very related to Thriving in Place, is the affordable housing incentives. Those are all on the council's plate now. They've gone through a process which a lot of you have been involved in through planning commission and community councils and all sorts of engagement. And those are now on our plate as a city council to discuss. So stay engaged if you're interested in those items. We do have another meeting this coming Tuesday, which will be a redevelopment agency meeting, a council meeting, as well as a limited formal meeting. So it's not a full formal meeting, no public comment, but that's our next meeting. And that's all I have for right now, but happy to take some questions.
All right, so who has some questions for Councilmember Mono? And I apologize if you've just come in the room, I might seem like I'm overly projecting as if I'm in some sort of rhetoric class. And it's because there's a microphone dangling from the ceiling. And earlier when I was speaking at a more normal tone of voice, I was told that I was not really very audible. So I would encourage all of you to sort of project like you're demonstrating your healthy lungs. So yeah, so questions for Councilmember Mono. I have a few, but I'd love for other folks to go first. You need to say nothing with greater confidence.
Nothing from me.
I guess I have a question. So on the Ballpark Community Council, how many people are interested in a lot more mixed use properties in the area? Is there a great desire for that?
When you say the Ballpark Community Council, so I guess that's not a question for Councilmember Mono so much that is.
Well, it's going to lead to a question.
Oh, I see. I see. So of the folks who are on the board of the Ballpark Community Council?
Well, and also your general feeling of the people.
General folks who are in the neighborhood.
Yes.
I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are interested in if buildings are going to have ground floor activation, they want the ground floor activation in those buildings to be legitimate and not just a mail room or an empty gym or space on the ground floor that isn't used. I think a lot of us have experience in walking past apartments in other neighborhoods where we notice the ground floor is not an active space. And we realized that that wouldn't really be healthy for the neighborhood. Does that help answer your question?
Sort of, so the general feeling is mixed use is fine as long as the commercial part of it is active and being used and not kind of a dead front.
Yes, sir. That's my impression, but I am but one person. But I'd love, Jeff? Oh, please go ahead.
I think I agree with you 100%, Amy. Sorry, I'm about to sneeze, but the street facing ground floor commercial space really should be public spaces, and that's something we're really discussing right now in relation to the Intermountain Health rezone request, which is more widely known as the Sears block. That's something that we are asking them to really make a strong commitment to, and figuring out how in the language of the rezone and any potential development agreement we can make sure that it's not, you know, they say if we, for instance, in that case, it's not just like the pharmacy and one coffee shop, but it's actually significant, meaningful retail that you may use even if you're not injured or sick. So that ground floor really belonging to sort of the community and enhancing street life, whereas the rest of the, you know, they're really asking for unlimited height on that block would be for the hospital use. So I don't think that's anything different than what I would hope for the Ballpark neighborhood as well. And hopefully through that process with Intermountain Health, we're able to come up with clear language that is successful. You'll notice on 400 South, they have the city's become better at that goal before. Some of the first redevelopment apartments in the 400 South corridor, you'll see windows that are, when you look in the window, they're either completely blacked out or there's a parking lot behind them. That's because the previous requirement was just for glass. It wasn't necessarily, it didn't say anything about what was behind it. And then the requirement turned to active spaces, which, as Amy mentioned, could be the gym for the apartment building or the leasing office. That was considered an active space. And so we're trying to get a little bit more sophisticated and requiring things like retail, restaurant, food service, daycare, things that are actually active. So hopefully our zoning is becoming a little bit more sophisticated to make that goal happen.
Ron, do you have a follow-up on that?
Well, so what I hear in my business from local residents is that they just figure the city's gonna shove a bunch of apartment complexes down their throats. And that's the last thing they want.
Councilmember Mono,
mixed
can you hear
use-
that?
Sorry about it.
Councilmember Mono, can you hear what Ron is saying?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Sorry, just checking.
And so, to me, the mixed use, because of some of the stuff we've discussed here, is just a gateway to allow that to happen. However, if the city is coming up with more thought out language, then perhaps they're gonna address that. Let's hope.
We've got Nick Norris, head of planning, here tonight, so I think you're asking the right questions in the right space.
I didn't realize Nick was there. That makes me nervous about the next zone.
Nick's bike just arrived. Nick.
There was some security guard negotiation to get the bike in, but we got that taken care of. I think when we talk about the zoning changes we're talking about, we'll touch on some of that stuff, but you know, I don't disagree with anything that has been said about what our goals are as a city in terms of making sure that we have those community serving uses in addition to the housing that we need in the city. So
there's a question in the chat from you, Amy, that says the rezone was on the Liberty Wells side of the street, right? So what are you referring to?
Several minutes ago, Councilmember Mono talked about a rezone on the 400 South block of State Street.
1400 South.
Sorry, yes, 1400 South block.
But correct, on the Liberty Wells side of State Street.
Right, and I believe that's a Colmena group rezone.
Correct.
Yeah. Um. Maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised. We can only use that joke so much, right? But it's the right block-ish.
Yeah, it's almost next door.
Yeah. I know. So I'm not sure everybody is quite caught up to speed, but I know there was a discussion in city council this week about potentially about studying changes to single family zoning across the city. I wondered if you might be able to talk about that a little bit, Councilmember Mono.
Yeah, I'd love to. So we had a really interesting rezone request come in this was in District 7, 1600 East. It's a lot. So they have zoning out there that is R1 7,000, which is kind of the middle of our three R1 single family zones. We have 5, 7, and 12,000. Most of what's in Liberty Wells, and Elpco is R1 5,000. So the type of neighborhood you're used to is a 5,000 square foot minimum lot size. As you go further east or up into Federal Heights, that size becomes much larger and requires a lot more square footage. And personally, I think the size of lots we have in Liberty Wells is great. It allows people there. I think there's even like unused space in a lot of those neighborhoods that we could add more housing to, ideally housing for sale. But that one rezone was a 7,000 square foot lot, but because of some of our zoning ordinances, it's not a buildable lot. There's a weird history with that. It's like a legal lot through the county, but not recognized by the city, etc. But they have effectively a 14,000 square foot lot because it's two lots. That is, the city recognizes it as one lot, but the county recognizes that it's two. So combined, it's 14,000 square feet. And 7,000 of it is really just got a shed on it right now, and they're not allowed to build anything on it. So it brought up a lot of questions about, are our current single family zones serving us anymore? And if you think about, the more I've learned about the history of Salt Lake City's zoning in the 90s, a lot of the zoning changed in ways that, the more I learn about it, I realize is maybe was appropriate for the time period, because that was a time when nobody wanted to live downtown and people were leaving and there was a lot of vacancy in houses, but people were still building higher density apartment buildings because they were cheaper and they could make more money on that. So they made it so it was hard to build anything but a single family house, and even that it was hard to build new single family housing, because if I'm understanding the people at the time, which I wasn't there, but they were trying to get the housing that already was built to be used and not to sit vacant. We obviously are in the opposite situation right now. People can't find housing that's affordable. There's not housing that's sitting vacant. There is housing that's sitting vacant, but it's not because nobody wants it. It's because the owners are not taking care of it or not trying to lease it out. But though so our situation is very different right now. So what we talked about on Tuesday was we did not approve that rezone, but we made some requests to the administration, so basically to Nick's team, to study what it might look like for us to update those single family zones to something that's serving our current housing market a little bit better. Our motion was purely just a request for them to look at things with some direction as to what things might be looked at. And it would go through the same process that every other rezone you're used to goes through, including the one you're going to discuss later tonight.
I have two follow-up questions on that. One, you mentioned the size of the lots in Liberty Wells and further east. Could you talk about what the size of the lots in Ballpark generally are?
Ballpark is a mixture of R1 zoning, and then as you get further towards Central 9th, it turns into RMF zones, and then it turns up into form-based zones. So the Ballpark zones right on West Temple are mostly R1 zones, R1 5000. But Main Street is commercial corridor. Ballpark's a little bit of it's those, there's commercial on 3rd West. West Temple has R1 5000, but those cross streets like 17th South and 1300 South are more multifamily or mixed use zones.
And two, could you talk about, I heard that there was some discussion about the role that historic districts might play in altering how we see the future of single family zoning evolving in this city? Could you talk
So-
about that a little bit?
That was something that Councilmember Wharton, he made a statement about that. And in my conversations with him about this, we talked about historic districts a lot. A historic district is an overlay. It's not a base zoning. So the base zoning is what we're talking about here, which is like the lot size, the setbacks, the maximum height, and things of that sort. Historic districts are an overlay on top of that. So those requirements will still exist. This would not touch any of those things. What it would allow is potentially in historic districts, there may be like the lot sizes might change, but those requirements to fit in the neighborhood and have historic character and all those things are still the same. And then the same requirements for any contributing structure, meaning a house that is historic in the historic district, is still protected by the historic district. So it's if you're living in a local historic district, not a national one, but if you're living in a local historic district, you have two sets of rules that you have to follow. We're only talking about the base zoning, not the historic rules.
All right. Anybody have any questions about safe encampment sites? Do we have one picked out yet, Councilmember Mono?
I don't think I'm allowed to say because
That sounds like we have one picked out.
I don't think we know for sure that it's picked out. But, I can't say much more than you have heard on the news.
I wonder what I've heard on the news.
A lot of work is happening on that. And we talked even on Tuesday, Wayne Niederhauser came to our meeting and we touched on it a little bit as well.
Follow-up questions about encampment sites, safe encampment sites? Getting a lot of no's. Okay.
One clarification, Amy, I could add is that it sounds like the direction that at least Wayne Niederhauser wants to go is less of campsites and more of like structures, very, very small kind of sheds, but it sounds like it's less tents and more structures that he's interested in doing, which could be heated and cooled. Obviously, I don't think there won't be kitchens or plumbing or anything like that, but just something that can have a lock on it and be a little bit more, I'll use the word humane than a tent.
So I guess that raises the question, since Wayne Niederhauser is a state official, he's the state homeless coordinator. Is this going to be a joint venture between the city and the state, or are these going to be separate ventures? And is there going to be a larger state site that's going to be a separate state-run facility?
I think it's public that the Wayne is looking at a pilot site of 50 people. So some might think that's very large, some might think it's not large enough, but that's the number of people that is being considered right now. And I would say, like, yes, we're working very closely with Wayne in his office, so it's likely that it will be a joint venture. When we approved the $500,000 in the city budget to help with this, we did it in a holding account, basically. So we have to vote to release that. So that will be on one of our public meetings as a budget amendment for us to consider. So before any money actually, any of your tax dollars, your city tax dollars, go out the door for this, there will be a chance for a public comment and for everyone to have a better idea of what it is, though it's fair to say those plans are still being made.
That's interesting, because that's already an evolution on what the Salt Lake Tribune reported within the past couple of weeks, that there would be two separate, a city site and a state site.
There may be. I think it's too early to know for sure what it'll look like, which is why it's also too early to say anything about exactly where it would be.
Excellent. Okay. Do you have, so is it also too early to say how either the city or state will choose the operator of any?
They're talking about an RFP. I don't know. So it would be something where they'd put out a call and people could apply, basically.
Okay. All right. Those are my questions for Councilmember Mono and about homelessness.
There's a question in the chat
Oh, great.
from Nanette. She asked, when will we know more about this topic? So basically, what's the timeline for release?
Yeah.
assuming everything continues to progress as quickly as it has been, I would be surprised if the public doesn't know more within a month. The goal is really to have it open for this winter, so that would, fall in line with that timeline. If there's hiccups or things happen that don't work for that and it doesn't happen, so I guess I would say if you don't hear something within a month, it's likely that there's some snags that are still being worked out. But I'm not, this is a mayor's office thing, so I can't guarantee that timeline. That's just that reading the tea leaves, that's what I would guess.
All right. Hello, Representative Briscoe. It's lovely to have you on the call.
Good to hear from you. The sound is excellent. Thank you to Salt Lake Community College. My question is for Councilmember Mano. Darren, when I've spoken with Wayne Niederhauser about what he's been working on, it's consistent with what you're telling us and the perception I have from his vision for how to find a place for people that's not in front of businesses and it's not in alleyways and parks, etc., is that if we were to tier it, the top level would be the resource centers. The city's discussed and is working with the other side academy on some small tiny house structures, and what Mr. Niederhauser is talking about is maybe one step below that. It wouldn't be tents. It would be more permanent than tents, but not as permanent as what the other side academy is discussing. Am I reading that correctly?
I believe that what you're saying matches what I understand there. I don't think there's any contemplation that each individual, I think they're using the word pod, but that each structure would have any kind of restroom or kitchen facility. I think those would be porta potties or public restrooms or whatever. But I don't think it's tents either. And Wayne did say in our meeting that for him, a bare minimum would be heating and cooling, which sounds humane to me. So I think that's, I like that he's going direction.
At one point, I know he told some of us that he had reached out to Utah State University, where they have a healthy landscape design program, and he was talking to some of the professors about working with students to talk about how to design a space that would be lower cost, but would provide some privacy in these pods. And was also talking about some of those very large tent structures like you see at Greek Festival and other places at a central location within the area where you could provide bathroom facilities, eating facilities, a few services. So it's kind of like, and I guess I don't want to use the phrase Utah way. I think that doesn't mean anything to me, but it's better than tents, but it's not as good as a tiny house. I guess is the way I read it.
I think that's probably, I think the big between what we're trying to accomplish and what I believe Wayne is also trying to accomplish with us in this is that there are a lot of people for whom a congregate living facility, a congregate shelter is either not safe or doesn't feel safe. People that may have trauma or PTSD or any other kinds of issues that make them not comfortable in the shelter, that choose to live on the street. And so we're trying to create a tool that will be better than unsanctioned camping, which we all know. I think Wayne specifics were words where that's the least humane thing that we can accept. And I would go further and say we shouldn't accept it. But there are people that right now that's the only thing that they will choose because they don't feel safe in the shelter. So this would be non-congregate spaces where they can at least have walls around them and on a lock. And I think what the belief is, and what we've seen in other cities, is that a lot of individuals who wouldn't choose a traditional congregate shelter will choose that.
I've also spoken with him when he's discussed. I mean, we hear in the media, we hear online, well, look at Denver, look at Austin, look at Miami. There are various cities that look at Finland as a country. But Denver has a winter shelter, and this is a different subject. They have a winter shelter and they move it every year, which is what we do, because people won't take it if they think it's going to become a permanent location. But they have encampments also in Denver, and there are sanctioned camping moves. And I know that Wayne was concerned about the effort to set something like that up every single year. And I know he's looking for a location that won't be threatening to many people, but would also provide some safety and security as I think this is what we call low barrier entry. It's like, hey, we can get you off the street. Okay, we understand you don't want to be with 400 people, 350 people, 250 people. Here's a place for you to go in which you can have your own little space, but receive some services, and you're off, and people won't be calling because you're in front of so-and-so's house. Well, I'm hopeful and I'm happy that you've set aside some money when you think it's right, and I appreciate your efforts. Thanks, council member. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Nanette has a question in the chat. Wondering if community will have a say about the placement of the encampment.
Councilmember Mono, did you hear that question?
Yeah, I don't. So there are two places for sure that the community will have a say, and those are the times when we have to vote. I don't know that there's going to be like about where the best place would be. I don't think something like that's going to happen. But the two places where I know you'll have a say is one, for us to appropriate the money. So basically, the hold on that $500,000, because that has to be done in an amendment, and all of our budgets are public. And then the second is my best guess that we're going to have to use the same tool that we use for the winter overflow shelters, which is a temporary land use regulation, which also happens at a city council meeting where people can know that's happening. And so those would be the two times when the community knows what's happening. I don't know that that's getting to the heart of the question. I think it's like what level it's going to be sort of a crowdsourced decision. And I don't think it's going to happen that way, to be completely honest.
And then there's another question from Jess Overson that says, does the east side of the city have any intention in helping shoulder the help and camping zone for unhoused neighbors?
I love that question. I can't speak for the entire east side of the city, but I can speak for myself and for my council colleagues. At least some of them know this is a huge issue for us, and something that we want to figure out how to make more. There is some hesitation from the provider community because the east side is a little bit less transit connected. Not everywhere, obviously, we have the S line and other things, but when we talk about sites, a lot of times when we're talking about services, it's where a nonprofit has land or wants to buy land and asks us for permission to do. It's not necessarily always where the city picks. So a lot of those things, the nonprofits that run the organizations, I'm not talking about shelters because those were picked by the government, but other services often are just wherever they ask us for permission to put it, which is why you see a concentration, because it's more efficient for them to have multiple services close together. Doesn't make it okay, but that's sort of what we see.
Well, I would like to say something. I'm the chair of the East Liberty Park Community Organization, which is an East Side Community Council, and we have been very support of the equity in homeless resource policy that the council is looking for and that people involved are looking for. So I know that, you know, D5, there are allies of D5. I can't really speak to any other east side.
Thanks.
And I forget when I write something in the chat that you in the room can't see it, but I just have said things like, shout out to Christina Robb, Chair of East Liberty Park, for being here tonight, but anyway. Yes, shout out, I very much appreciate multiple people from all sides of District 5 being part of this conversation tonight. And District 4, thank you, Brandy. Okay,
That's all that we, oh,
Councilmember Mono, before you sign off, I would love to run through some community announcements, just so you know just a few things that are going on. I promise you it will not take very much time.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Terrific. Let me run right then. Be able to share it in a reasonable size. Can we see that in person and on Zoom? Maybe?
you're good.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you again, Salt Lake Community College, the Arts Campus. Yes. Okay. Multiple people in the chat have prompted me to talk about this tonight, and I promise you I intended to. That's why it's in the slide. There's going to be an outdoor community movie night tomorrow on Paramount Avenue next to the men and women's shelter, the Gail Miller Homeless Resource Center. I'm impressed. They're going to show The Dark Knight. There's going to be a bunch of our Salt Lake Police Department there, including beloved Nate Meinzer, the Dark Knight himself, I suppose. I didn't do that. I didn't say that. I've been told there's also going to be free popcorn, exciting snacks. Let's see. So I encourage everyone to attend. What an exciting place to see an exciting film. We have a day of service coming up. Let's see if I can drag this down so you can see folks' heads. Yes, look at that. Okay, Saturday, just to drag it off the screen. Saturday, there's a day of service all over the city, and I believe this is being run in conjunction with the city and also My Hometown, a community group that's partly run out of the church, but also I think strongly run out of the Rose Park community. I'm gonna mute Joel because I think he's the culprit. We had a great experience cleaning up an alley that we've been able to kind of maintain since then, not with power tools, but like, you know, kind of maintain the garbage needle situation in there since then. You know, there are only a few city people depicted here, but the neighbors and My Hometown who were cleaning up that alley last year, I think there were about 20 of us, Erica, do you remember? There was a whole slew of us that morning. So I encourage folks to meet us at the People's Freeway Park, which was renamed the Ballpark Playground this past year at 9 a.m. Love to see you there. Love to pick up garbage. One of my favorite things to do with my neighbors. Let's see what else. Let's drag this down again, release some excitements. We have a neighborhood block party in the ballpark itself happening. This is not an event that the city had to put on. One of our neighbors on West Temple submitted us to a national contest that's run by Verizon and Next Door. And our neighborhood One, because Verizon and Nextdoor, we're really impressed by, frankly, this group. And the cohesion that we bring to this neighborhood and how passionate we are about this neighborhood. They like checked out some of our social media and they're like, holy crap, these people are really into their neighborhood, and gosh darn we are. So they are going to fully sponsor a party inside Smith's Ballpark Stadium for us on Friday, September 29th from 5 to 8 p.m. Come out and hang out in the ballpark, please. You know, we will, if any of you who attended a couple years ago for the Night Out Against Crime, it'll be a similar situation. We'll get to go down and play on the field, play cornhole, play yard games. I've made a special request to the Salt Lake Bees, and I've heard that it will be accommodated, that the Smiths, the Smiths grocery costumes will be present. So if any of you sports are great, but sports where you dress up like giant vegetables, come on, everybody. I like watching every time I see it, the produce race. It is a great thrill for me to see the banana fall over. So if you've ever wanted to try on those costumes, this is it. This is your chance. Come to this event. I'd love to see you there. Put on a cabbage costume.
Amy, on
Yes.
that note, Jim Grizzly says this would be a great public service for the residents of the Gay Miller Resource Center to be involved in, but to give purpose and help the community.
For the movie night, I assume he means.
I don't know.
I'm gonna take a guess,
Okay, so
and I believe that Jen is right. It would be a lovely occasion to attend.
okay.
But they're certainly welcome to attend the block party as well. I cannot see the chat while I'm projecting. It is a personal limitation. The fairground, I understand, is also having an event, although I do not believe that they are having it in conjunction with the Fair Park Community Council. Who knows why, but I do not. There's our official flyer. Yay! There's our official press release. Yay! We'll push it out later. Oh, and we are this is our attempt to try to meet your demands, to a combination of in-person meetings and on Zoom. Is it working? I don't know. You can tell us later. Did you all see? You guys in Zoom land didn't, but Salt Lake Community College just delivered us snacks and drinks. Holy smokes. I know you have snacks and drinks in your own home, but come on, just give us some credit for showing. That is all I have to share, because I know Detective Fallows is attending virtually, and I would like him to talk as well tonight, because I know he is doing other meetings tonight. Hi, Detective Fallows. What's the haps?
How's everybody doing tonight?
Oh, you sound so great.
All righty. Y'all can hear me okay? Yeah.
So good.
Coolness. All righty. Before I get started, I'm going to put some links up in the chat for everyone, like I do always. So for tonight, I'm going to just kind of go over a couple of things that I've been wanting to go over in each community council, and then give some updates in the neighborhood, and then take any questions. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat, or if you're in the room, think of them, and then when I'm done, we'll get to them. So for those that don't know me, I'm Detective Sam Fallows. District 5, 6, and 7 are my districts. I'm the community liaison detective. So one thing I want to cover, there's been some confusion with SLC mobile app compared to reporting crimes to the police. So I just want to make sure we understand the difference. So a lot of you in the Ballpark community know about the SLC mobile app and utilize it, and I am super grateful for that, and I appreciate that. The SLC mobile app is a great resource to drive the city resources to where there's issues. But what it is not a great resource for is reporting a crime. So if you have a crime that happens to you, or if you're the victim of a crime and you want to report it to the police, obviously you can call us, of course, but if you'd like to make an online report for something simple like a theft, where there's no suspect information, or maybe a vandalism or something like that, that needs to be done on our website, and that's slcpd.com. So it is a little confusing because they're close to each other. But the SLC mobile app is something on your phone that you upload, you know, a concern regarding homelessness or a down stop sign or something like that. SLCPD.com is used for creating a police report for a crime that might have happened, or if you're the victim of a crime. So just want to distinguish the difference between those two. It is important that we do get the most accurate statistics that we can for the neighborhood. And like Amy knows best about statistics probably more than anybody, but they're very important to like drive our resources to the problem areas. And we utilize them a lot in the police department. Everything we do is pretty much stat driven. That's how we are able to kind of direct our bike units. That, and then obviously as your community liaison, when you come to me with an issue in a problem area, I can also address that way as well. So just wanted to distinguish that difference real quick. Pull up my notes here. So just to give a couple of updates to some highlights that have happened in the neighborhood over the last month or so. So everybody knows about the shooting that occurred at the 1485 South Major Street address. You know, I worked with the property owner over there, and I believe that we probably resolved the issue at this point. They're going to be renting that space to someone else. So keep an eye on that for me. And if you see any issues going on in the meantime, please let me know. All my contact information is in the chat. But I think that hopefully, at least for now, we've resolved that issue. And again, if you're starting to see like parties kick back up or something like that, let me know so that I can stay on top of that. For the alleyway, and this is the one that a lot of y'all in Ballpark do clean up pretty regularly, the alleyway on between Main Street and Richard Street from Andrew Avenue down to well, basically down into the Utah Pride Center. We have some operations going on there where our bike unit is going there daily to kind of help mitigate that specific area and any issues. I'm conducting a CPTED review. For those that don't know what CPTED means, it's crime prevention through environmental design. So I'll be able to work, I'll be able to make some recommendations such as having Advantage Services clean that area on a regular basis, which I think is happening, but I'm going to make sure in the CPTED that I include that. Making sure that the bushes get and all the overgrowth gets trimmed down in the alleyway to make it, you know, less appealing for any crimes that could happen in the alleyway. And again, that's the whole point of crime prevention through environmental design, right? So I'm conducting that right now as we currently. So that is an update for the alleyway. Amy wanted me to touch on the pride flag incident with the burning of the flags and those crimes that happen. I don't have any information to update right now or anything that I can give out, but I will say that our detectives are working diligently on that case to bring a resolution to it. So, but it is still an active investigation, so there's not a ton that I can give out right now in a public forum. But they're actively investigating still. So, and if you have any other updates on it or something, you can reach out to me and let me know, and I can provide that to our detectives who are investigating that case. And I just did want to highlight the hard work of our bike unit as well. Our East Side Liberty Bikes unit, Sergeant Christian and his squad, they have been working a lot, you know, kind of in the just in the hot spots areas of the Ballpark neighborhood, Main Street Motel, those areas. They've been making several arrests like literally every day. So they're working super hard. When you guys give me a problem area, I usually reach out to his squad first and ask them like, hey, can you just hit this area and help me out? And they are always super diligent in taking care of the issues. You know, and like I said, they have made multiple arrests all within just a couple of blocks of, you know, Main Street in those areas. So they're hitting it hard. They're out there for you guys to keep the community safer, and super proud of what they've been doing. And I'm super grateful for all their hard work because it has been making a difference, I believe. I think that's most of the updates I have. Is there anything I'm missing, Amy, or anything else I should talk about?
Yeah. Do you see the Wendy comment?
Yes, I by habit, I unmuted myself like a terrible person committing a crime. Yes, and I also got a longer comment directly from Wendy Knight, but Detective Fallows, Wendy Wade, who owns some property, runs some businesses on Major Street, suggests there's a large camp happening on Major Street where some houses that we were pretty familiar with no longer exist because they burned down and were thankfully demolished. Property is not very secure. The weeds are kind of out of control. Are there any thoughts on how those 4 properties are now going to be controlled with winter coming? It is a usual problem area, even though it's changed in character very much with those houses no longer being there. There's still some issues.
Yeah, for sure. I am actually working on that right now, the weeds and all that with civil enforcement. So that should be taken care of fairly quickly. So obviously with the process with civil enforcement, they do have to give the property owner time to do it. So that's the longest thing that can take the longest. But I think that's already happened. So I think we're to the point, if I remember correctly, last time we talked about these, they're to the point where they should be getting our contractor out there to deal with that. So if that's not done in the next like week or so, just let me know for sure, and I'll just make sure that it gets done. But it is on the radar for sure, and I appreciate that. But it should be done fairly soon. Oh yeah, so the graffiti, that's a good point, Amy. I want to bring that up. That is great. Graffiti. So graffiti is something you can report on the SLC mobile app that is a crime, right? So that, just to confuse you even a little bit more. So graffiti reported on the SLC mobile app is not reported as a crime to the police department. Our gang unit definitely does their best to kind of keep track of those, but it's more for their purposes of like trying to find where the trends are of the gangs and stuff like that. So if you're seeing graffiti, you can make an online report, you can call an officer. But if you do put it on the SLC mobile app, just please also just make a quick online report. You can pretty much do them at the same time. It won't take that long. But yes, very good point. Graffiti, vandalism, those types of things, they can be cleaned up. They can get quick. It's done quickly generally when it's put on the SLC mobile app, but it won't count as a crime statistic, and it may or may not get to our gang unit. So putting it in a crime report, in a general offense report, will definitely go to our gang unit because those all get routed to them, and they can kind of review them and follow up on those things. So definitely a good point. So let's see. Yeah, the weeds are, I mean, if it's city property, then yeah, Wendy's right. Just keep calling. be that squeaky wheel, the grease of the squeaky wheel that just gets it going. If it's private property, you can reach out to me if it's an issue, and I can certainly work with our civil enforcement. Or you can just reach out to civil enforcement directly, and ask them, to start a case on it. Our civil enforcement division is awesome. They work really hard, and they're usually very responsive, but they're limited. Obviously, they don't have unlimited resources, and they have a lot of properties that they take care of. But reaching out to me is probably the quickest way to get it resolved. But you can reach out to me or civil enforcement directly on those types of things. Any other questions?
I think we're good.
Perfect.
Thanks for signing on, Detective Bellows.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate y'all, and please reach out if you need anything. For Kate, my contact info is at the top of the stuff that I put in the chat, but I will put it in there one more time real quick, just to make it easier for you. Oh, you just did it. Thanks, Amy. Alrighty. Well, please reach out if you have anything. I'll be happy to help you.
It's true. He will. All righty, let's
Thank you.
talk. Thank you. Let's talk about zoning. We're gonna learn about a whole new zone. I get to move. Yay.
So while Brooke and John are coming up to get all set up.
You're gonna talk about your bike.
We're gonna talk about the bike, the negotiation I had to go through getting it. But really, I just wanted to make a couple of quick introductions about this proposal. As some of you may remember, we were here 2 meetings ago,
Mhm.
July. We've taken a bunch of feedback and looked at that, and so we're making a different proposal based on that feedback. So John and Brooke, Mandy and Brooke are gonna go over that. But there was one big recurring theme that we heard regarding rezoning the parking lots of the ballparkers, you know. As it stands right now, we want to get our proposal that we have yet to get the mayor's approval yet is to slow that piece down so that once the guiding principles for ballpark next are released in January, we'll start talking about the zoning of those parking lots. So we think that that's going to be the outcome, but I just wanted to get that on the table. So because that was such a prominent theme that we heard, that's our approach. Hopefully next week we get the thumbs up on doing that. But the people who are running the ballpark next, we've talked with them. We've worked out a timeline and a schedule that works with their process too, without creating a big delay or delaying anything else that we may be doing. So hopefully that addresses that. And we can focus on what this is. And so our proposal, if you remember, we're going to use what's called the TSA zone. It's the same zone that's on North Temple and 400 South. And kind of ancillary to this, we've also been analyzing that zone to see what works, what doesn't, and just the transit. That coupled with the comments we heard about the concerns, the wishes, the desires for the zoning that would implement the ballpark station area plan. We're proposing a new zone for the ballpark area that accomplishes many of the same goals, and Brooke's going to get into the details of it. But it's very similar to what's happened with zone in the central 9th neighborhood, just to the north of the 900 South viaduct. So hopefully it's something that people are familiar with. We're going to have a few more engagement activities after this. So including one thing we really want to do is get out with the community and do a walking tour to show what the form-based code does, particularly at the ground level, and then show how it fits into the area directly around the station. So I'm going to turn it over to them, and I also have to run because I have a friend who's getting married and dropping his dog off at my house at 8:15. So luckily it's a close bike ride. So just wanted to make that introduction, and thank you for being patient with us and giving us really useful, constructive feedback. And hopefully that's demonstrated how we use them. That's what I have.
Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I'm recovering from an illness, so I'll try to speak as loud as I can.
Maybe I didn't need to shout as loud as I was. I just got that feedback when we were practicing and I was like, oh, no.
Have to notice like council to pick up everybody, so
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah.
But let me know if I need to speak up. So tonight I'm presenting Salt Lake City's ballpark station area rezone updated proposal. And the purpose of this presentation is to recap the project background and process. I'll go over the previous proposal, touch on the public input we received, and then go over the proposal modifications we have made in response to the public input. So just to touch on the background, the city's proposing zoning map and text amendments to rezone properties in the Ballpark Station area plan. The plan is a small area community plan encompassing the properties between 900 South to 1700 South and State Street to I-15, and the plan was adopted in October 2022. The plan includes a future land use map and descriptions that guides future development and land use decisions. The city is proposing to rezone properties in 3 future land use areas, a portion of the heart of the neighborhood, the Jefferson Park mixed use area, and a portion of the Main Street area, as shown on the map. The existing zoning in the area is predominantly zoned a variety of commercial, public lands, and multifamily residential zones. However, the majority do not provide the density, development standards, uses, or urban design elements specified in the plan. The city is proposing zoning map and text amendments to implement the recommendations. So just to touch on the previous proposal, I'll first start with the heart of the neighborhood, and this is what we discussed at the last community council meeting. The plan indicates this area should consist of high density mixed use development with ground floor active uses. The plan indicates the area is appropriate for high density development up to 10 stories in height, and then it also specifies urban design and right of way improvements for development. So staff was proposing to rezone a large portion of the area to TSA UNC, which is Transit Station Area Urban Core District. A smaller portion of Form-Based Urban Neighborhood 2, FBUN 2. And then a small area on the south side of 1400 South, which is a future library site to PL. And then proposing to preserve the existing zoning of the Ballpark facility. And then also a small R15,000 zone along Merrimack Avenue, which is an established single family neighborhood. Staff was also proposing associated TSA text amendments to establish larger front and corner side yard setbacks. Then also ground floor use requirements and sidewalk width requirements for properties fronting 1300 South and West Temple. So next is Main Street. The plan indicates the uses in this area should consist of housing, restaurants, and retail services. The plan indicates that higher density development is appropriate between 900 South and 1300 South, while more moderate density development is appropriate between the Utah Pride Center and Kensington Avenue. So staff was proposing to rezone the northern portion of Main Street to TSA UNC and the southern portion to FBUN 2, and then preserve the existing zoning of the Ballpark facility. And then last, Jefferson Park mixed use area. The plan indicates this area should consist of a lived work play environment with a mix of uses and building scales. The plan indicates that high density mixed use development is appropriate along 200 West and West Temple, while medium density residential development is appropriate on the areas adjoining Jefferson Street and the Avenue Streets. So staff was proposing to rezone the interior of the blocks along the Avenue Streets and Jefferson Street to FBUN 1, and then the exterior of the blocks along 200 West and West Temple to FBUN 2, and then preserve the open space zoning of Jefferson Park and the RMU zoning. And it should be noted that no modifications are being made to the previous proposal for this area. So next, I'll touch on the public input. The input period began on June 2nd, and since then, staff received 20 email comments, and actually a couple more have come in since I created this presentation. On July 13th, we presented the June 2023 proposal at the community council meeting and received additional input. And through the analysis of the comments, we identified several primary topics and common themes. But these included use considerations, design considerations, specifically associated with the TSA UNC zone, infrastructure concerns, and then also comments regarding the project scope and boundaries. So some of the general concerns were impacts associated with high density development, the need for public amenities, open space and green space, and then also active ground floor uses. Then we received several questions and concerns regarding the project boundaries, and then the public infrastructure in the area. However, the majority of the concerns we received were associated with the proposed TSA UNC zoning. So between July and August, we reviewed and considered all the public comments and made modifications to the proposal. So the first, which Nick touched on, is considering the zoning for the Ballpark North parking lot as part of a second phase in January 2024. When the Ballpark next guiding principles are released, staff would evaluate the potential zones consistent with the principles and meet with the community to discuss the zones. This would require a 45-day public engagement period prior to planning commission hearing as well. The second modification is to replace all TSA UNC zoning with the MU8 form-based mixed-use zoning district 8, which is the new zone that Nick also introduced at the beginning of the presentation. So while the TSA zone does align with many of the plan objectives, it does not provide all of the standards necessary to address some of the unique characteristics and challenges in the area. The staff is proposing a text amendment to establish the new MU8 zone and map it in the heart of the neighborhood, the Main Street area north of 1300 South is shown on the map.
Brooke, one thing I was saying, this zone was literally tailored for your neighborhood. It was created for this. Hopefully we may be able to use in other parts of the city. But like I said, we heard what you said and we realized this is a really unique spot and it needs a unique zone.
So next, I'll just touch on some of the general standards of the MU8 zone. So the MU8 zone is a high density form-based mixed use zone, which allows for a wide variety of uses, which are listed on this slide. The standards are form-based standards with a focus on massing scale and building placement, with an aim to facilitate pedestrian-friendly, engaging development, and also mitigate high-density impacts on adjacent properties. The forms established in the zone include row house, and then multifamily, storefront, and vertical mixed use, which I'll refer to as other forms. So some of the general development regulations include a maximum building height of 40 feet for row houses and 75 feet for other forms. Developments over 50 feet in height are subject to the design review process, which is a public process that requires public notification. It also requires the development to comply with a variety of site and building design standards on top of the base zoning standards. And it does require review and approval from the planning commission.
Which means it would come to the community council first.
So in comparison with the TSA zone, the MU8 zone has more open space area and setback requirements. This includes open space area design requirements. As far as setbacks are concerned, the zone requires a front and corner yard setback of a minimum of 10 feet for all forms. And then as far as the interior side and rear yard setbacks are concerned, the row house standards are more typical of residential development with smaller interior side yards and larger rear yards, while the setbacks for the interior side and rear are more minimal for the other building forms, but it should be noted that there are greater setback requirements for properties abutting lower density zones. The zone requires a minimum sidewalk width of 10 feet along property frontage, and then also it requires a minimum of 80% of the ground floor of street facing facades consists of a permitted ground floor use. So for row houses, the requirement is to be occupied by a live work unit along, and this would be applicable to properties along 1300 South and West Temple. For other building forms, there are specific use requirements, and mailrooms and leasing offices cannot count towards that requirement.
Could you go back? What's public service portions of businesses? Could you talk about that?
So I'm not as familiar with that use. I'm not sure if you are.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it's saying is like, for example, if you had a bank branch, the lobby would be the public service, somewhere you could go into, not the private offices or business. So some type of, for example, sort of use or a school or some sort of office, just so it's publicly accessible, usable spaces.
Could a daycare count?
Yes,
And I know that they're part of the public conversation now. I just want to make sure that they're part of our public conversation too.
yeah, that's something we've been talking about a lot in the division as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So as shown on this slide, the NU8 zone has many design standards. And the zone requires many design standards to create quality pedestrian friendly development. The standards also help mitigate the impacts associated with large scale development and impacts on adjacent properties. So I won't read through every single one of these, but you can see there are many standards.
I'm really glad to see that the limitation on upper floor glass, and I wouldn't have thought that mattered. But when I marched in the Pride Parade this past summer, June, I was on a block where we were resting for a while with a really reflective building. It was the amount of heat that was reflected off of that building onto the street below was just so palpable. And I know we talk about buildings creating shadows that could potentially help mitigate heat island effects, not if there's that much glass. It was shocking how much heat was reflected off that building.
Yeah, and we would allow for reflective glass in the zone as well. And one of the ones I was pointing out, just because it came up a lot, is limiting the maximum length of the street facing facade. You know, we heard you, we said, I don't want to enforce south. We heard that loud and clear.
Yeah.
So we're limiting that to ensure that you don't have a 500 or 600 foot length that right now is limited to 50.
As far as parking requirements concerned, the city's parking requirements vary by context area of the zone it's located in, and the land use of the site. So the MU8 zone would be within the transit context, and that includes zones that immediately surround mass transit or in the downtown core. So this context area has the lowest parking demand and requires minimal parking or may be exempt from minimum parking requirements. So
How does the city view parking requirements in the context of 55 plus housing?
We do allow for exemptions for parking. For example, I think with any sort of senior housing facility, that you can cut that by half. And then you can actually see further reduction with other means, whether that's distance to the track station. That, but I think in a lot of ways we do the same thing with affordable housing, but we kind of see what is the usage going to be, and obviously, given other community, there's probably less, because that doesn't mean there's going to be any. Obviously, with your neighbors at Taylor Springs, there's still plenty of people who are driving.
And I mean, actually, I think that in some ways, I think that might allow people to age in place, and that might be counterintuitive for some folks. But
okay, so next I'll just talk about the tentative timeline process, and I've separated it out into phase 1, which is the proposal before you tonight, excluding the ballpark or parking lot, and then phase 2 with the ballpark next and associated ballpark north parking lot rezones. So tonight we're presenting the proposal modifications. Tomorrow, the 45-day public engagement period for the proposal modifications begins. And so the property owners and occupants within 300 feet of the site will be mailed notice of the modifications. And then also the recognized community organizations that are applicable to the area will be notified. In late September, we will hold our public engagement event. And then
It's something that they kind of mentioned, sorry, I mentioned off there, but you could kind of mention having something actually physically in the neighborhood, we can do that.
And then with a tentative planning commission briefing on October 11th, and then in late October or early November, having a tentative planning commission public hearing. The planning commission will make a recommendation to the city council. And then sometime in November, we're tentatively planning on transmitting the item to the city council office the city council will hold a briefing as well as a public hearing. And then they'll schedule the item for a final determination, and make that final determination. As far as the second phase is concerned,
It was a question in the chat, whether about owner occupied versus tenant.
We're going down. It says, this is from Kelly, is a percentage of new development required to be set aside for owner occupied purchase versus rental?
No, we don't have that anywhere in Salt Lake City right now. And there may be some issues kind of the Fair Housing Act, whether that's even able to do.
okay, so
Sorry, I also have somebody direct message me, Fraser Nelson would like me to read, thank you for listening to our community. As a resident, this is a huge improvement. I'm especially excited about the increased walkability, green space and trees. We recognize that this neighborhood is changing and we welcome new residents and housing, but this feels much more human scale and possibility for home ownership. Thank you for listening.
I also noticed she mentioned she had laryngitis and wasn't feeling well, so you can see, hopefully you get feeling better.
Yes.
It seems to be going around.
Yeah, yeah. Brooke really wanted to be here today.
Yeah.
But there were options. There are
Yes,
options.
There are options.
We are trying to work hard to create options.
this is much better than our last meeting. We won't. Or at least technically.
Yes.
Can I ask the question? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you again for hearing many concerns and being willing to adjust the proposal. I feel like it's in, sometimes as a resident of Ballpark, I feel like the city doesn't listen to like what, you know, what I would hope for, and I feel like this was an instance in which you really heard. And are trying to make the best out of, you know, what you can. So thank you for listening.
It's just nice to hear. Thank you.
Sorry, can you put like the window part down so I can read the rest of this?
Oh, yeah, that's always a challenge.
Oh.
It moved on yours, but
Yeah. Hopefully that helps.
If
Yeah.
you get codes.
Yes.
Oh, I am, okay. Okay, sorry about that.
we can read it.
I can
for you.
read-
Sorry,
I can read
it's
it.
not on her screen, so I don't know why it's not reflected
Yeah.
up here,
I'm not too sure,
but
but
we can read that aloud.
yeah, I can just go through that. As far as the second phase is concerned, which would be the ballpark next and the associated reasons for the ballpark north parking lot. In January 2024, the ballpark next draft guiding principles will be released, so staff will evaluate the potential zones consistent with the principles, meet with the community and initiate the process. As I mentioned, it will require a new 45-day public engagement period prior to a planning commission hearing. So that would place a tentative planning commission public hearing date in March for those proposed zoning amendments, and it would follow the same process. The planning commission will make a recommendation and city council will make the final determination. So tomorrow, we will be making updates to the project webpage, because I know it's a lot of new information in the process, so we'll have additional details on the webpage tomorrow by the end of the day. And we're currently taking public comment. And we will take the public comment through the planning commission public hearing. And so we're happy to take any questions and comments, but we did bring a couple questions for the community to start the discussion. And so last meeting, we received some feedback that the community would like the project boundary extended to the east side of Major Street. So that's shown as 0.1 on the map. And I know it's probably not able to see that. Okay, I can see your thoughts on how.
You can kind of see it towards the bottom. There's a little arrow.
It is hiding.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah,
But this would be Major Street from 9 South all the way down. There.
mhm.
I think that we heard some concerns. Well, we heard a few concerns on Major Street specifically, but one was whether or not this zoning should be reflected on both sides of the street.
Mhm.
But we weren't, as long as I was hearing different statements, we just wanted to clarify people had strong feelings or opinions about that, if that was still something we want to do, this is now the time if we want to be able to shift those lines, we can do that.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to see if I can zoom in, but it's not working very well. So this. You can kind of see how, what is proposed on the west side of Major Street would be reflected on the east side. And so, north of 1300 south to Kelsey Avenue, it would be the MU8 zoning. And then, south of 1300 south, it would be FB12 on the east side of Major Street. So that's one option we wanted to bring to the community for feedback. And then the second one is that we received a few comments regarding the proposed density along Lucy Avenue, which you can see, fortunately. So one of the things we were considering was changing the proposed zoning to FB12 along the north side of Lucy Avenue, and then a portion of the south side where the smaller parcels could exist. So we're happy to take some additional input on that. If anyone has any comments, we will take those into consideration.
It would be great to see those kind of the characteristics of both those kinds of zones lined up side by side. You know, and I know that sounds like a lot of work, but for the folks who don't look at this day in and day out, you know, thinking about setbacks, thinking about height and, you know, ground floor activation requirements and that kind of thing. And I'm sorry to make more work, but that would make it a lot more readable for the average person thinking about how will this impact walking down the street,
Yeah.
living in the neighborhood, that kind of thing.
And we will be making some models for the public engagement event so that the community members can see the types of development this new zone presents, and then same with the other proposed zones that we wanted to this one.
Yeah, that's probably the best time to do it. Well, I think part of what we were thinking about with public engagement events to have kind of a few stations around the neighborhood set up and basically have, there's a photo, this is what it looks like now, this is what it potentially could look like. And Brooke is very skilled with building these models and things. We have great people on our team that can do that. It can really give you a good feel. I think we could be able to just show you what Lucy would look like potentially with a greater scale, whether it's the MUA or the FDMS2. So I think it's a great idea.
There's a lot of questions in the chat, comments as well. Several thanking you for removing the parking lot. And that's seconded. And then Councilman Mamo said that he will chime in. But I always think it's a good idea to think of streets as matching on both sides. So I think adding the east side of Major Street is a good idea. I would also consider matching both sides of Paxton. And I think Lucy should be reconsidered based on the parking options. And then a question is, so what would happen to the single family homes currently on Lucy in this proposal?
Yeah, so they would be allowed to continue existing. They would be considered, depending on the zone we select, they may be considered non-conforming uses, and then they would be regulated by the city's non-conforming chapter. But yeah, I have to.
But they could be bought and sold,
Yeah.
and they could be lived in forever. Obviously, this is not a development proposal. I think some are aware of that. If you're not, the city's not in here, you're not taking property and taking houses. This is giving people an opportunity to develop their property in a different way. To be able to implement the ballpark stationary plan that was adopted by the city council. So you want to stay in your house and just see, you are welcome to stay there forever. But if you would like to utilize existing zoning to create something different, you would have that opportunity. But with those smaller, those small streets with CPACs and Fremont Michaels, they're really small lots. So I think bigger changes will come when people can acquire multiple properties. One like 4,000 square foot lot, you're not gonna have a lot of flexibility as to what you can do. So I think we'll see it sometimes things change with that. So it could change quickly, it could change, it may not change very often. So just we have to wait and see how the private market decides to invest in the neighborhood.
I have a question. I don't know if I'm able to or not. Addressing traffic on West Temple. Is there any way we can do a one-way street? Because as it is right now, if you drive anything wider than a Tesla, you have to stop and wait for somebody to drive by.
Yeah.
Maybe do Main Street one way and West Temple the other way. Just, there's gotta be something done. I mean, you walk down to the ballpark now. And when the ball game gets over, you're taking your life in your hands.
Well, and I have a pickup truck and I drive West Temple often, we get it, there's parked cars.
Yeah.
Oncoming traffic. Yeah, that's it, I get it. It is a narrow street. Probably not something we can do with a part of this plan, but it's something that I'm happy to share with our transportation division.
I'd appreciate it. It's bad. I live right off 17 South. And got way too many people and need to control the traffic somehow.
West Temple probably is the best tree canopy of any tree.
Yep.
Street I can think of, like a major thoroughfare, thoroughfare.
In Ballpark, that's for sure.
Regarding the Main Street segment of this, is there a reason that the southern boundary cuts off where it does? I would say, is there a reason it doesn't fully extend to 17?
Yeah, so we looked at the rezones within the Main Street boundary that were applicable to the heart of the neighborhood specifically. And so further down Main Street is outside of that boundary. And we were specifically focusing on this area because this is the area that has the most development pressure. So this is considered the first phase of this rezone.
I also think we got a lot of feedback during the public engagement for the ballpark stationary plan. That people felt like Main Street had, a lot of people liked what was happening. That the lower scale density, whether it was townhomes or small offices, small retail things. That people wanted to support that and wanted to see more of that scale. Versus what would happen like around along 13th South. So the stationary plan reflects those desires we heard from the community. Again, nothing, these lines are not set in stone. And so that's why we're here, if they think that maybe they need to be adjusted somewhat, we're definitely.
Most of that that's south of it, I believe, is commercial corridor zoning.
Yes.
Which doesn't really conform to anything within the picture of the rest of that plan.
You're right, and so we're, okay, yeah, sorry, maybe I misunderstood your question, so we are taking just this piece right now, but you answered it correctly, I'm sorry, I answered it, but yeah. We are focused on this area because it has most development pressure, we will come back, we're gonna look at the entire ballpark neighborhood. Everything that was outlined in that stationary, not the whole neighborhood, everything was outlined in that stationary plan, and so we will in future phases also look at that, I think we all agree that CC is not a gray zone. It's not a great zone to create neighborhoods and to create walkability, so I believe we will be there, that's fine, I don't have we already have phase 1 and phase 2, so that's probably my phase 3.
Yeah, maybe I'm misunderstanding, it seems like, I'm confused. Wouldn't it make more sense to have the higher density on Main Street than on West Temple, because we have those issues of people going through, but you guys have recommended, if I remember correctly, higher density on West Temple, which is so increasing the population on that street that's so condensed, would create more hazard, whereas on Main Street, we have these big, wide open thoroughfares, and they could support a higher density. Which isn't taking high density out of our neighborhood, it's just putting it into along an artery that can support it.
Sure, and I think with West Temple we specifically did that because it was reflecting on sort of some of the existing development that already exists along there. And what has already been approved along there that has 4 or 5 stories, they're not necessarily built yet, but we were saying between Second and West, where we already have 75-foot tall buildings there. That West Temple will be reflective of that because there's similar, not as much height yet. But I certainly think that's sort of taken into consideration.
It's at the edge of it, where you.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and the Ballpark track station is also located right within that area. Due to the proximity to transit, it could support some more density, just because there are more transportation areas directly within that area too.
But we'll look at it.
But-
We can take a look
Yeah.
at it.
I think we're not talking about a mile away, we're talking about West Temple, Main Street, which is one city block.
Mhm.
And the concern isn't necessarily can people utilize the tracks, it's having people on that very thin street that has no lighting. Walking across in the middle of the night while we're trying to drive, hopefully not killing anybody. I don't know why nobody's died there yet, and someone does, I'm sure there'll be a change, but I'd rather, like Ambrosia had to die for us to get light outside here. I'd rather we not have, certain extents like that.
Okay, I mean, so this,
Kevin, I'd say it's dark in there, but then I should go to prison for making that fun. Prison. Anyway, sorry, it's a terrible joke. Anybody, sorry.
the zoning, this is based on what the ballpark history finance said. It doesn't mean that it can't be adjusted or like that, so we'd be happy to take a look at it.
There's a chat question. Nanette asks if there could possibly. So there could possibly be rezoning down to 1700 South in the future, question mark?
Potentially, yes. We don't, I mean, it's, the plan boundaries go from 9 south to 17 or south, so it is something that we will be looking at. But even with this one, I realized there's some areas that shouldn't be rezoned. We looked at those kind of stable, single family neighborhoods and said, no, we're not gonna look at that, that's fine. In fact, we had a downzone one like 7, 8 years ago. I mean, so we want to be respectful of that. And as we're studying this area, it doesn't mean that every area is prime for high density. In fact, that's why we're starting here, because this is where density should be. The rest of the neighborhoods, you start to move, especially south and east, probably won't have that same sort of density.
I just wanted to talk about West Temple again and kind of the narrowness and congestion there. And I think, part of that has to do with not having adequate parking requirements for the buildings that are there. I know a huge number of people, I live in Ballpark apartments. We have to park on the street and we're using both sides of the street. And so as you add more density, that's just gonna make the whole neighborhood more congested. Because especially if you're not providing enough parking for those people. And I also, like my building is for those 55 and above. And some of those people are never gonna use traps, they're never gonna walk, and they're never gonna bike.
Maybe, I'm one of them, I'm not gonna be honest.
All right, okay, yeah, I mean, we hear you. We'll definitely go back and look at West Temple for sure.
Out of curiosity, I'm not even flipping here, but have you all driven it at night?
I used to live right off West Temple, so I've taken it many times.
So lately, as
So I understand exactly.
Because then can you imagine another, because you're talking about high density apartments, which means like 200, 300 people per complex, so you're legitimately taking, and I don't think it's the conservative estimate to say 700 additional people in that small area. That's concerning, just for cities.
And then, like support services that need to come to those buildings. Or, the residents, they have nowhere to park either. To, whether it's to drop off food or come and pick them up, or, check on individuals who need assistance.
Okay. Thank you.
What was the feedback from the Salt Lake City School District about rezoning their school from public lands to MU? To the new district or the new zoning type?
So we have not sent the mailing notice yet, so that starts tomorrow, and then we also have an email list that will be emails that I'll be sending some updates to as well. We have been in contact with the school district, and they actually have not submitted comments regarding any of the rezoning. They had some questions about if the school operations would be allowed to continue, which they would under a new zone. But we will be reaching out to them directly as part of our public input period, which begins tomorrow.
Would any proximity rules about what is allowed? Around, I know there are rules about how close you can sell alcohol in relation to a public school, but I don't have any appreciation for the kind of building, other uses and buildings that you can have around a public school. Can you enlighten me?
Yeah, I mean, it's generally alcohol related because we don't allow any sex-oriented businesses to be near residential uses. So it usually just be whether you're convenience store.
It's actually
or your
quite
restaurant.
close there.
Yeah, and the difference, there's consumption on site, consumption off site. And so if you go to.
I mean, my sexually oriented business is quite close to the school.
Right,
Okay.
anything that was existing that was different than
Yeah.
going forward, but. And also, a school is gonna be a permitted use in the zone anyways, and so it would not be a non-conforming use.
I see.
But like, for example, on consumption, I think it's 600 feet is what the state law says, and whether it was a non-conforming use or not, it's based on the operation. There, so whether it's a school, church, playground, library. Church, playground, library. You know, one other community service, one of my park. Say that. But I think there's 5 and anything that's within 600 feet, but would definitely, but would not allow for those uses. And like the Challenger School would as well, despite it's not a public school, it's a private school, it's still open school.
So I want to just ask a question, take it back a couple of steps, because you said that this was a new zone created for this particularly interesting space. But we're hoping to apply this to other places in the city. So what is it about this space that makes it interesting that we created the new zone?
Yeah, so there are some unique challenges in the area, like the lack of open space and green space and trees. So one of the things we did with the zoning standards were increase the open space requirements for private developments as well. And then also requiring the 10-foot wide sidewalks within this new zone as well. It's pretty unique. Instead of just along a specific property frontage, it's required along any property frontage in the new zone too. Just to help increase the walkability in the area.
Well, I also think one, the city is known for wide streets, and yet we don't have all of them or not. One was what companies brought up, but 13 South for as much traffic as it flows every day. It's really not that wide when you look at 4 South, 5 South, 6 South, even like 7 or 8 South. It's not. So there are new challenges, and so whereas in 4 South we may not require a setback, here we do want to require a setback because you see that new building that's right by the Ballpark track station. It's really close to the street.
Yeah.
It does kind of doesn't have a real friendly feeling. I mean, it's great that it's affordable housing, and I want to see that. Support that, but we might, if that was scoot back 5-10 feet, that would create a different sort of feeling, and it might help not only looking for as a pedestrian when you're walking down the street, you don't feel like you're in between moving traffic and a building. I think the other thing that's unique about this is that we still have industrial type of uses. We have warehousing, things like that, in conjunction with high density housing, in conjunction with community uses and low density. And so as we're looking at this, it wasn't as easy. Some areas are very similar in their uses and makeup, so it's easier to say, hey, we can find something that works. This one's different. And we realized it when we started getting feedback, so like, yeah, we're not getting this right.
Can I ask a question about timeline? So I saw you put up those slides and you said November would be sent to council if it's kind of meets all the approval steps along the way. What's kind of like the reasonable timeframe for it gets approved by the council and is put into actual practice?
Yeah, so it can take a couple months to be placed on a council agenda. They're completely in control of their agenda, so we really have no idea how long it will take as far as that's concerned. And once we do take it to city council, they may ask for modifications to some of the zone requirements or some of the proposed rezones as well, which would add some additional time. So yeah, unfortunately, we don't have a timeline for that.
I guess it is a priority for the council, Council Moss, so I mean, it reflect maybe on that as well, but they put a lot of effort to get that ballpark stationary plan pushed forward quickly. And then to get us to move forward with implementation on it. I know it doesn't seem quick, but this is pretty quick for us to move forward. And this is a very optimistic time. We're always trying to be optimistic here. We also want to do it right. If it takes a little longer, then it takes a little longer. We're not going to rush something through that it's not going to get anywhere. So.
Just wanted to ask about the public land zoning. I mean, do those properties come under the public lands division?
So typically, city-owned properties are zoned public lands. Typically, there's.
I mean, they're zoned, I mean, they're owned by the city.
Yes.
But do they become part of their purview? Are they having any input on, those pieces of property? Are they part of any, I mean, like now that things have changed with the ballpark, does it become part of their master planning
Right.
of public lands?
Jancy's a person, she knows it's the right question to ask, so the city has lots of different buckets to who owns what property and who runs it, and all it's collectively owned by the city, but you know, the RDA maybe charges something, housing, which is something. So it's own public lands, but it's not, run or like governed by public lands division, it's the public services division, because they're the ones who do the upkeep of the ballpark and the lawns and make sure all those things are taken care of. But those things could change, and that's gonna be more what happens with the ballpark next program that's moving forward as to what's gonna happen there. I think it's gonna be, no matter what, I think we're gonna see in my mind, John's opinion here. We're gonna see open space, we're gonna see community space, and we'll see mixed use, I think. So, yeah, I think at some point in time, there will be some like parks and public lands involvement. There isn't at this very moment, but I think that for sure we'll see that in the future as that kind of progresses.
I understand they have their own planners now too.
They do.
Hot goss.
We do try to work.
But I mean,
well.
exactly, these two. Especially when we talk about the parking lot. And I don't know if you've seen, you know, like our other, the community council documents that have talked about that they don't really want to see that high density in that area. And I don't know, it's the urban heat islands that kind of stuff creates, and if we can address that rather than add to it.
Really great. I would say, try and say, active in that ballpark is process as well, especially if you're in the corner of the ballpark requirements, it's obviously directly you and everything else, but I'd say stay active in that to make sure that's very great what you say.
There's been 2 comments in the chat about, please no one-way streets.
Perfect.
Right, I don't want to cut off discussion, but I do want to be cognizant of time, and thank you all for your very thorough public presentation.
And as Brooke mentioned, this will all be online, hopefully tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thanks, we really appreciate your time. I'm gonna talk to you guys about this, and
It's really exciting to see it so different from what we initially saw, because what we initially saw, like.
no, I think it feels right. I think we all agree from the staff level that as we started, this idea floated and grew and grew and grew, and then to the point that, you know, 2 weeks ago, like, we gotta do this now, because we're on the community council agenda, we need to finish, we need to get this for this sick and still power through this, so thank you for everything.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying not to talk about the talk at the moment, but my contact information is on the slide. You're welcome to reach out to me and submit comments. Or if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me as well.
Great.
Thank you so much for being here tonight.
All right.
I was plugging in a time machine sitting in a classroom, it's weird.
Especially after coming up several flights of stairs.
Yeah, it's having flashbacks to high school.
That's what I was.
I've never not worked in school. Yay, all right. Any other questions, comments, city stuff we need to get at? Shall we give this school a break and get out of here? Okay. All right.
I just wanted to say, Amy, that I think that was a really great first,
First step
hybrid
of this.
stuff. I mean, it was manageable. There's a couple of things that using Harrison's computer that I can see that you could tweak, but I think it'll work great for you guys. Be really impressed.
Exciting stuff.
This seems like a good home.
All right, we've got a pilot agreement with them through December, so we'll see how this goes. I'm not gonna guess we can't guarantee snacks every time, just appearing magically, it's very sad. But yeah, I don't doing this without a co-pilot, no matter how you do it, stinks. So, but I very much appreciate the help, virtual and otherwise. Anybody who chimes in and says like, you missed seeing this comment, it's always helpful. So thank you. All right, I am gonna turn off the recording and sign off, online world. Thank you all for signing on. Have a lovely evening. Please fill out the Ballpark Next survey. Please, please, please. We will post it online. But I agree, it is smart to participate in the engagement process.
Now at the time.
Now's the time.
That's why y'all coming. It's just, to me,